Kevin, it's all yours.
Really appreciate it, Kate. And thanks to everybody for joining. I've really been looking forward to this. I am presenting this live from Seattle, Washington, in my home. So we're utilizing the wonders of modern technology today for me to come to all of you. But Kate and I connected, I guess it was about 6 or 8 months ago, and talked about this series of workshops you were doing. And I've really been looking forward to it. I'll do a mercifully brief introduction here and then jump right into the good information. But the introduction will sort of frame where all of this advice is coming from. As she mentioned, my name is Kevin McMullen, and I'm the founder and the chief education officer at CollegeWise. And CollegeWise, we're a national college admissions counseling company, which means that families hire us to coach their kids through the college application process. So we help with everything from planning for the right classes and tests to choosing the right colleges. And right now, we're working with all of our seniors to prepare to finalize their college lists. And then once they know where they're applying, we'll be starting their applications later in August and working on their college essays. And one of the things that's really been helpful to me in my career, and I've been here for 27 years at CollegeWise, is we've got over 150 college counselors on our staff, and more than half of them we hired out of college admissions offices where they worked as admissions officers, reading applications, making decisions about students. And so everything that I'm going to be sharing with you today about college essays has really been vetted by all of these industry experts that we work with. And we've asked them to tell us, how did you use the essays during the process? What was it that a student would do that would make you say, as a result of that essay, to the rest of the committee, you need to read this one? What is it that that student does that's so much different from all the other students? And one of the things that is surprising for many high school students is that the college essays are a very different project than most essays that you've ever written. They're certainly not like writing an academic essay in an English class. This is an essay about you, where the college is trying to get to know you a little bit better. And so what that means is that a lot of students who believe that you have to have a dramatic story, that you've got to have something that's happened to you that nobody else has ever experienced before, that it needs to be dramatic, that this needs to be the thing that cracks open the gates of admissions. The essays are important, but there's a right way to approach them, and I think a less helpful way to approach them. And the good news is what I want to do is share 4 tips today that will help students write stronger college essays for any college that you might be applying to. And if you use these 4 tips, I believe that you will write stronger essays than most of the students who are applying to college. The best part about college essays is that, unlike so much of the college application process, they do not discriminate on the basis of GPAs and test scores. That every year at CollegeWise, we work with A students, C students, and everyone in between. We have C students that produce great college essays, compelling stories that really show admissions officers who they are. You don't have to be someone who is at the top of your class. You don't have to be an AP English. You don't even have to be someone who necessarily considers yourself a great writer. If you are a great writer, it's an advantage that you get to use your strength on the college applications. But this is really something in terms of the essays and the writing that's part of the applications. This is something that's available to just about any student, and thankfully, even at the beginning of your senior year, when there's not much else you could do to dramatically improve your chances of admission. Maybe you're going to retake the SAT or the ACT. Maybe you might win an award. You can certainly and should certainly still continue to challenge yourself and get good grades. There are things you can do, but the college essay is really the one part that's still this giant blank slate. And I'm saying college essay is sort of a catch-all for all the essays. I love this photo here because it's a photo of an actual college admissions office. And what you can see here is that even though students are applying online today, they are still college admissions officers do print up all of this material and they put it into files. And then they distribute these files to the admissions officers, and they'll spend months reading these and making their recommendations about who should be admitted and who should not be admitted. And when everyone is distilled down into these pieces of paper, all these students can figuratively start to look the same because they're all reduced to the same questions, the same pieces of paper. And as anyone who's spent any time around a high school knows, teenagers are not all the same. Teenagers are a remarkably diverse interesting, fascinating group of human beings. And colleges, when they are admitting students, are trying to get a sense of who this person is, how you would contribute to their campus community. The essays are the part of the application that let them see the student behind the grades, behind the test scores, behind the activity. Who's the real person behind all of this? And so, just to define my terms a little bit, because some of you may not have actually seen real college essay prompts, so I wanted to share just a few examples. Here's one from the Common Application. Now, the Common Application is the most popular way to apply to college today. More than 1,000 colleges are on this application, and you fill it out one time, select which schools you want it to go to, and they have an essay prompt that you respond to. There are 7 different choices of prompts you can pick, and I'm picking a few of them here to share with you. So here's one from the Common Application. Here's another. And of the 7 choices of prompts you have on the Common Application, this is the 7th one. So this means on the Common Application, when you're writing your longer personal statement essay of roughly 500 to 600 words, you can pick one of the 6 topics they've given to you. And if you don't like any of those, you can pick a topic of your choice, share an essay you've written from another college. But this is the Common Application's way of saying, we want you to write about whatever you would want to write about so that we can get to know you a little better. Now, in addition to this one essay that every applicant needs to complete, many colleges also say, well, we'll be on the Common Application. You can fill out that application to apply to us, but we also have one or more essays we want you to write just for us. These are called supplemental essays. So once you pick your particular colleges on the Common App, it will show you which of these schools require you to write essays just for them. Here are a few examples from schools that I picked. Here's one from Johns Hopkins. So ultimately, they're asking, tell us about an important first in your life, big or small, that has shaped you. Here's an example from Boston College. Here's one from Georgia Tech. I've got one more after this. At CollegeWise, we call this the "Why This Major at This School" essays. Many schools will ask, why do you want to come to college here? Many schools will ask to talk about, how you want to pursue your intended course of study at their school, and many will combine those two and say, why do you want to study this particular topic, and why do you want to do it here? That's the "Why This Major at This School," and that's an example from Georgia Tech. Here's my last example, one from the University of Michigan. Now you can see from these supplemental essay questions that they tend to be more specific. They're asking a specific question they want the student to answer. Where with the Common App and most broader, as they're defined, personal statement essays are really sort of they're broader topics, looking for the student to share any angle of their life that might help the admissions committee get to know them a little bit better. But the good news, once again, is if you follow these 4 tips that I'm about to give you, any kind of essay that you're writing, personal statement essay, a supplemental essay, a long essay of 500 to 600 words, a short essay of 100 to 150 words, anything in between, if you do these 4 things I'm going to show you right now, and any student can do them, you will write strong college essays, and your essays will be stronger than most students applying to college because they just don't know how these essays are used. So let's jump in here with my 4 CollegeWise essay tips. And these are tips that we've been teaching for 27 years now. And again, these have been vetted by the former admissions officers that we work with. And I love these because they're just so accessible to anybody who's applying to college. So here we go. My first tip, and I'm going roughly in order of importance here. My first tip is, don't try to impress the admissions officers. Just be honest. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, right? Because everything you're trying to do to get into college is about impressing the admissions officers. That's not a bad instinct. You're trying to show every college how hard you've worked, what you've accomplished, what you could contribute at their college. You want them to admit you. So this notion of trying to be impressive is not misguided. But here's the challenge, and here's why an instinct that doesn't serve students. What most students do, understandably, when they sit down to respond to any college essay prompt is they ask themselves, what's going to sound good? What does the admissions committee want to hear? And again, I understand that instinct. But the challenge is that when you ask those questions, most students arrive at very similar answers. What they end up doing is they think to themselves, what's going to sound good? What does the admissions committee want to hear? And so then the student goes and chooses their most impressive accomplishment or activity. They choose something that they're proud of. They describe that to the college, what it was that they did. That could be playing on the soccer team. That could be engaging in National Charity League, being on the speech and debate team, playing the tuba in the marching band. And again, not misguided, but they're picking something they're proud of. They describe it to the admissions office, and then they share how they think this demonstrates that they have the necessary traits to be successful in college. So it might be my time serving as the junior class president on student council shows that I have the leadership abilities necessary to succeed in college, some version of that. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with doing essays like that, except that they all start to sound the same. When students are asking themselves those questions, what's going to sound good? What does the admissions committee want to hear? And they're landing on the same answers. I should pick something that I'm proud of, show it to them to make sure that they see it, that they appreciate it, and then inject some life lessons, inject some learning into this to show them how this demonstrates I'm prepared for college. All of those essays start to read the same. When everybody is arriving at similar conclusions, it inhibits your ability to stand out. You're writing the same essays that so many other people are writing. In many cases, this is almost like applying, or people approach it like they're applying for a job. If you've ever, and you all will someday, students, but for many jobs that you apply for, they ask you to submit a cover letter along with your resume. When you send a cover letter and you're trying to get a job, you absolutely should sell yourself. You should say, this is what I did at my last job. These were my accomplishments. This is how I increased sales fourfold. This is what I could do for your company. That is what they want you to do. But when you're applying to college, that's not really the point of the college essay. One of our counselors who worked in admissions at University of Chicago, then he worked at Caltech and then UCLA before he came to college-wise, he described it this way. He said, when I would read a student's application, not the essays, when I would read the application, that's where I would be asking myself, does this student deserve to be admitted? Have they worked hard enough? Have they accomplished enough? Could they be successful here at University of Chicago or Caltech or UCLA? That's what I'd be asking myself when I'd read the application. But when I would read the essays, he said, that's where I would be asking myself, would I want this student to be my roommate if I were back in college? Would I want to hang out with them? Will other students want to be in class and outside of class with them? Will faculty enjoy interacting with them? Who is this person? Because you are going to college to go to school, right? That's what it's for. But college is more than just school. You're presumably, many of you will be living on campus. You'll be part of a campus community. You might be living in a dormitory with other students. In college, you're not necessarily in class, 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day like you are in high school. You're going to have days when you might not be in class at all, which means you have more time to be engaged in groups and activities around campus, leadership opportunities, community opportunities. So they're trying to get a sense of who this person is that's joining. And when you ask yourself what's going to sound good, what do they want to hear, and you show them that what you think they want to hear, you're writing the same essays as everybody else. You're not standing out and you're not allowing them to get to know you. A great way that I heard this described once, and I spend most of my time on this tip out of all the four because this is the most important one. There was an admissions officer at the University of Virginia that wrote a piece that he talked about college essays, and he compared them to fast food. And I have his one of the things he says here. He says 90% of the applications I read contain what I call McEssays. usually a 5 paragraph essay that consists primarily of abstractions and unsupported generalization. They are technically correct in that they are organized and have the correct sentence structure and spelling, but they are boring, sort of like a Big Mac. I have nothing against Big Macs, but the one I eat in Charlottesville is not going to be fundamentally different from the one I eat in Paris, Peoria, or Palm Springs. I am not going to rave about the quality of a particular Big Mac. The same can be said of the generic essay. Now, what do we make of this? What do we do with this information? Here's his punchline. I'll let you read it for yourself. Now, this is important because most students I know who have been in the marching band, as he's talking about here, they would never say to a friend or a family member, I've been a member of the band and it has taught me leadership, perseverance, and hard work. Even if those things are true, it's not something they would generally express to another person, but they're expressing it in an essay here because they're making the mistake I'm advising against. They're trying to be impressive. So instead of just sharing why they've spent so much time in marching band, what they love about it, what draws them back to this activity, what their favorite part is, what was difficult for them about this, whatever the story is, instead of sharing the real story, they're sharing the version that they think will be impressive. And what he's saying here is that those all start to sound the same. It's the soccer player who says that playing soccer taught me the importance of hard work and committing to my goals. It's the person who does a community service project and says, this really showed me the importance of helping other people. And the important sentence here is a McEssay is not wrong. It's not that this is a bad student. It's not that the college concludes this student does not deserve to be admitted. But as he says here, it is not going to be a positive factor in the admissions decision. It will not allow a student to stand out. So, what should you do instead? Let me give you a couple examples of real college essays from college-wise students to get you thinking about how you might do the same type of essay with whatever it is that you choose to write about. We worked with a student who was on the cross country team at her high school, and her essay started out, the worst part about being the slowest runner on my high school cross country team is that sometimes I fall so far behind during races that I actually have to stop and ask a spectator for directions. That's a true statement. She actually said that during our essay brainstorming meeting. Now, is my point here, you should make fun of yourself, you should talk about something that you're not good at? No, that's not what I'm saying. But this student had a really interesting story. Her story, which she explained in this essay, is that when she got to high school, she and her best friend knew it's important to get involved. They thought maybe they wanted to try a sport. Cross country was the only sport at the school that didn't have tryouts. If you wanted to do it, you just showed up and did it. So freshman year, she and her friend went out for cross country. And as she put it, 3 weeks later, the best friend had quit the cross country team. But this student, 3.5 years later, was still going strong with the cross country team. And it just turned out that no matter how hard she worked, how hard she practiced, and she did, she worked really hard, she just didn't get the genetics that were going to let her be a really fast cross country runner. It just wasn't in the cards for her. So no matter what she did, she was always the slowest one, and they had all these really fast runners on their team. But she found ways to make contributions to that team anyway. So, for example, she hosted the dinners they had the nights before their meets, where they wanted to do what's called carbo loading, where they all eat a bunch of carbs to store them up for the race the next day. And she learned how to make different kinds of pasta that she would serve to her teammates. She was also the one that during the summers organized the summer workouts for these runners. They would get together 3 or 4 days a week to go for runs. This was something she took responsibility for. Now, people who don't know about college admissions might say, why would you do that? Why would you write an essay about being the slowest runner on the high school cross country team? You're just admitting to being not good at something. but that's because they're falling for this mistake, right? That I'm saying you need to avoid. They're thinking that everything needs to be impressive, where this particular student was very proud of what she'd done on the cross country team. She was proud that she had stuck with this, that she didn't quit 3 weeks into it like her friend did. She was proud of the contribution she made, cooking the carbo load dinners and planning the workouts. She loved being part of this team, and the team loved having her on it in spite of the fact that she was the slowest runner. That was the real story. And so the real story is what the college admissions officers are looking for. And what the story is matters less than the fact that you're telling it in a real way and that it's something you want to talk about. So for some students, that might be, I'll give you an example. We had a student who grew up with a single parent raising them. She had a younger sister who was 6 years old and her mom worked. So this student didn't have any after school activities because every day her activity was she went home and took care of her 6 year old sister until her mom got home from working a late shift around 9 o'clock every night. That was how she spent her time, and it was important to her. The first sentence of that essay was, as soon as I get home from school at about 3:30 every day, my most important job becomes to make my 6 year old sister laugh. That was sort of her measure of whether or not she planned a good afternoon with her sister. Did she make her sister laugh? But what we got to know about that student was here's this slice of your life that you have that we wouldn't know about otherwise. This slice of your life growing up with a single mom, taking care of your sister. So this was a little bit more of a serious essay, but it still helped us get to know this person. I'll give you another example. We worked with a Greek student. I mean, he lived in Los Angeles, but his family was Greek in heritage. And as he described it, he said, there's a stereotype about Greek people that we are a loud people. My family embraces that stereotype. The title of this essay was Chaos in the Kitchen. He said, when people come over to our house, they often think my family is fighting with each other because everything we say is yelling. And in the kitchen is where most of this yelling happens. We've got, my younger brother is a hockey player. He's always got his hockey stick in the kitchen and the puck trying to work on his slap shot. My sister is a ballerina. She's usually working on new movements in ballet, and she's practicing them in the kitchen. My 86-year-old grandmother who lives with us is out there cooking dinners. She's deaf, so my mother is yelling even louder at her than she is at the rest of us. This took us inside his home and said, this is really important to me. This is something I'm going to miss when I go to college. All this noise, all this chaos in the kitchen, because we have 5 kids in the house. And as he put it, we're Greek and we're loud people, and that's what we do, right? But so that's something that we wouldn't have known about him had he not written this in an essay. Sometimes essays can be very serious. We worked with a student who wrote his essay about the reason he quit the football team in the fall of his senior year, which he had played for 3 years on that team, was because his mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was going home every day after school to help take care of his mother. So that's a very serious essay topic. But then you've got the student writing about being the slowest runner on the high school cross country team. But any one of those, what they did right was instead of sitting down and saying, what's going to sound good? What does the admissions committee want to hear? They instead thought about what is it that I want to say? What is it that I would like to share about my life? And sometimes it can be something serious and life impacting, like a mother with terminal cancer. Sometimes it can be about a legitimate family responsibility, like taking care of your sister. But it can also be, about being the slowest runner on the cross country team. It can be about how loud your family is in the kitchen. It can be about the annual camping trip your family takes together. It could be about what it's like to be on the high school basketball team when you're only 5'2" and how you manage that. I mean, whatever it is that other people know about you, that you tend to think about, like, this is a good example of my high school life. Those are generally good things to share in your college essays because these admissions officers are not just admitting collections of grades, test scores, and activities. They are admitting real people. All those things matter. The grades, the test scores, the activities, all that stuff you've heard matters. It does matter. But when they get past that and they get all that, they say, like, who is this person that we're considering admitting? And as the college-wise counselor I referenced, said, they're asking themselves, would I want this student to be my roommate if I were back in college? So it's almost about like trying to get them to like you. And we want to stay away from cliches in college essays. A cliche is something that's been said so often it almost has no meaning anymore. But this is one where it's actually true. If you want people to like you, the best way to get people to like you is to just do what? Just be yourself. That's what you need to do in your college essays. Now, of course, before I move on to the second tip here, you have to use common sense when embracing this rule, right? That, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't care at all about, how you're perceived when you write this essay. It's a college admissions officer who's reading this. So if you write a whole essay about how terrible your chemistry teacher was, blaming them for the C that you got in chemistry, that's not a very smart thing to write your college essay about because an admissions officer is going to read that and say you shouldn't be blaming your teacher for this, right? So be mindful of who the audience is, but remember they are not showing up to this reading process hoping that you will write about particular topics that are make essays. They want you to do the opposite of that. They want you to share the real stories about your life, and they want you to work less at impressing them and more at engaging them. And the way to engage them is to be yourself and tell the truth. My litmus test, by the way, and I use this after every one of these rules, but my litmus test here is if you write your college essay about something that when you show it to your best friend says, "Oh, this is totally you," then you nailed it, right? Where if you showed your best friend an essay that said, "I've been a member of the band and it has taught me leadership, perseverance, and hard work," your best friend might say, "That doesn't sound like you at all. I've never heard you say that about the band." That's the litmus test, right? Ask yourself, would the people who know me best, who know and love me the most, when they read this, would they say, "This is definitely you"? If you do that, then you're probably on the right track, and you're avoiding this first mistake of we don't want to try to impress admissions officers. Just be honest when you're writing these essays. Okay, so that's tip number one, which I spend the most time on because everything kind of builds on that one. Okay, my second tip is own your stories. Own your stories is a college-wise phrase that we use with our students, and anyone can do it, but it sounds like it's really difficult. And the good news is it's actually really easy to do. Own your stories means you have to write stories that no one else applying to college is going to be writing for every essay that you write. Now, that sounds like a huge, impossible task, right? Most high school students will say, "Well, I haven't done anything or experienced anything that no one else has experienced." If you have, by the way, great, then you can write about that, right? If you won a gold medal in ice skating when you were 13 years old at the Olympics, you can write about that. No one else has done that. Most people don't have an accomplishment or a life event that no one else has experienced. But the way that you talk about whatever it is, or the way that you write about whatever it is you're sharing, the more details you put into it, the more you take ownership of the story. Because your experience having a part-time job at a fast food restaurant is not the same as the experience that every other student who worked at a fast food restaurant had. Your experience playing on the football team at your school is not the same as every other student's experience who played on the football team. Or your experience struggling through pre-calculus, but ultimately prevailing. Your experience tutoring your best friend through a topic, a subject that they were struggling with. Your experience playing in the orchestra, or doing a community service project, or getting your black belt in judo. Whatever it is that you're writing about, that experience is not the same as every other student who went through something similar. And so details are how you take ownership of the story. Now, I want to walk you through this just a little bit. So, as you're considering what to write about, and as you begin to write about whatever the topic is that you've chosen, continue to ask yourself, could someone else tell this story? And if the answer to that question is yes, then inject more detail into the story. So going back to our cross country runner, when she opened her essay, the worst part about being the slowest runner is sometimes I have to stop and ask for directions. There's a chance that another cross country runner could say the same thing, right? So what she did, probably not very many that say the same thing. It was very funny and just sort of sounded like her, but technically someone else could in fact fall that far behind and have to ask for directions. So she put some details in there and said, this happened just 2 weeks ago when I had to stop and ask an elderly couple who had their binoculars with them because they were bird watching out there during our race. I stopped and asked them how to find my way back to the parking lot. Well, there's the detail, right? So it's not that that detail takes this from, a mediocre essay to a great essay, but what it does is it makes it distinct. It makes it different. So even if I, as an admissions officer, read an essay from an applicant who writes about being the slowest cross country runner, and then I move on to the next application. And now this student's essay comes up about her experience being the slowest cross country runner. It will be different because of these details. I'll be reading about a different student in a different scenario with different memories and different takeaways from this experience. So continue to ask yourself, could someone else tell this story? If the answer to that question is yes, inject more detail. Now, here's the magic trick I'm going to give to you. This is a college-wise student technique that we use, and if you use this, you are using an advanced college essay technique. If you keep asking yourself, could someone else tell this story, and trying to find details that you can put into it, and you can't find enough details, be willing to choose a different story. Why is this like a magic trick? The reason it's a magic trick is that most people approach the college essay by making the first mistake that I talked about. They've asked themselves, what's going to sound good? What's going to impress them? They race right to the activity or accomplishment that they are most proud of. Now they're committed to writing about that. They don't want to let that topic go because they're convinced that this is what the admissions committee wants to hear. And so this is why sometimes when a student comes to college-wise and they've already written an essay and they want our feedback on it, we have to ask them, how much do you like this essay? Because I don't want to tell you that this is the wrong topic, the wrong approach if you already like this essay. But the truth is that most students, once they've committed to something, they have a very difficult time letting it go. The college-wise students, because we've taught them about this, will say to us things like this. I always thought I was going to write about playing on the football team. It's like my favorite activity. I've really enjoyed it, but I don't have enough details to own that. I mean, I can write about how we do double day practices during the summer. I can write about what it's like to be on the football team. I can write about the teamwork and how I like the guys and all of that. But that's kind of like any other football player's story. So I think I should write about something else. And here's the beauty of this. Most activities and accomplishments, whatever it is that you think or that you're feeling proud of, they're going to be on the application anyway. In that example, football will be prominently listed on the activities section of this student's application. So this student isn't saying, I'm going to forget about football. I'm not going to tell them about that. They're just deciding I'm not going to write an essay about it. They're just deciding it doesn't invalidate what you did. It doesn't invalidate the accomplishment. It doesn't make it less impressive. It just means that you're deciding, I don't need to write an essay about this because I don't have enough details to own it. So each one of those examples that I've shared with you before, and just about every great college essay that we've ever seen, the student injects enough detail so that they can own it. Think about the Greek student that I talked to you about. He's not the only student applying to college whose family hails from Greece. He's not the only student applying to college who's got a lot of brothers and sisters. There will be more of them, right? But he's taking us figuratively inside his house. Here's my kitchen. My brother has the hockey stick and the puck. My sister is doing pirouettes in the kitchen. My grandmother is 86 years old and she's deaf, and my mother is yelling even louder at her than she is at us while my grandmother is cooking dinner. Hear all those details. So another Greek student, right, with a large family could write the same essay about how their family is in their house, but it would be totally different because this student put all the details in. So continue to think about that. And these tips begin to work together now. If you start your college essay, any one of them, any prompt that you're doing, if you start it by thinking not about what's going to be impressive, but what do I actually want to say? What's my honest answer to this? And then as you think through how you're going to write that, and as you're writing that essay, if you keep asking yourself, how can I own this story? Could someone else tell this? And you keep putting more details in, you're going to take ownership of a story that's going to stand out, that's going to make them remember you. And if you can't find enough detail to put in and take ownership of the story, then you have this magic trick I mentioned where you can just let that story go, not feel bad about it, not be emotionally attached to it, and instead just say, I'll put that on the application. I'll make sure the college sees it, but I'm going to write my essays about something else because I don't have enough details to take ownership for it. So don't try to impress, just be honest and own your stories. Here comes the third tip. Don't repeat information from the rest of your application. You can see these tips begin to tie together now because think about the McEssay example that admissions officer from University of Virginia shared. I have been a member of the band for the last 3 years, and it has taught me many important lessons about what was it, hard work and perseverance. Well, first of all, that's a student that's going to describe what it means to be in the marching band. As a college admissions officer, I know what it means to be in the marching band. I know what a marching band does. Even if I didn't do it myself when I was in high school, I've read enough essays, I've read enough applications. I know what that's about, right? So you've listed marching band on your application already. And most college applications will ask you to describe the activity with a few sentences. They'll ask you to share any honors or awards that were related to that activity. They'll ask you to tell them roughly how many hours a week do you do this? How many weeks a year do you do this? So if marching band is a substantial commitment for you, and maybe you've also won some competitions with that band. Maybe you also go to like a summer camp for for band students where you go and you actually work on on your routines for 7 or 10 days over the summer. All of this is going to be listed on the college application. They don't need you to write an essay about it, right? Unless you've got something new to share about that. And so what you want to think about your college application, you want to think about your college application as each part should be sharing something new about you. And there can be some overlap, but if you've shared all that information about marching band on the activities list and in the honors and awards list, and they get a sense of your career from there, and then you write a 600-word essay describing all of that again, you've just wasted those 600 words when you could have talked about something else. So the way to avoid this mistake is to remember that every essay must do one of two things. The first is it must tell a story not mentioned elsewhere on the application. So, the student writing about the chaos in the kitchen, the Greek student. There's nowhere else on the application the college is going to learn that about him. There's no place on an application to tell you about your family and what they're like when you're at home, right? So that's an example of something that's brand new. The student who was going home after school to take care of his mother who had terminal cancer, the student who took care of her little sister after school. These are things that there's no place to list them on the application. So a college essay is the perfect place to share them. But you can also do this. You can share new information about something that is mentioned elsewhere on the application. That's what the slowest cross country runner did. Everything about cross country was listed on her application already, right? They saw how long she'd been doing it. They saw how successful the team had been. She didn't have any individual award. Actually, that's not true. I think she did win the coaches award one year, but they saw all that. What they didn't know is, hey, she's the slowest one on this team. She works really, really hard, but just didn't get the genetic hand of cards that was going to let her be a fast cross country runner. And she found ways to make contributions anyway. That's the kind of kid that an admissions officer reads about and says, she can make a difference on our campus here. This is the kid who won't quit freshman physics because it's too hard. But she wrote about new information or shared new information about something that was mentioned on the application. I think of another example. We worked with a student who was a recruited basketball player and a very, very good student, but was getting attention from colleges for his basketball. And he said exactly what I mentioned a second ago about owning your stories. He came into his essay brainstorming appointment at CollegeWise and said, I always thought I was going to write about basketball, but now that I think about it, and you told me about owning your story, I don't really have anything to say about basketball that most successful basketball players wouldn't be able to say. So our counselor talked with him about it, and what he ended up writing about was the basketball hoop that he has at his house and how he and his younger brothers and their dad have had all these fun and games together growing up around this basketball hoop. He shared in his essay brainstorming all these examples. He had two younger brothers that were 1 and 2 years behind him, and they all loved basketball, and their dad had played college basketball. And he had all these stories like sometimes my dad will wake us up on Saturday morning and say, last one on the court has a job to do. And we would all scramble out of our bunk beds and put on our basketball gear and we knew that the last one out on the court had to pick up, here are the details, by the way, had to pick up all the apples that had fallen from the apple tree in front of our house. He talked about how they played this game called King for a Day, where they would play 2-on-2 against each other, and it was usually the youngest brother and the dad against the middle two brothers. And this kid writing the essay, who was the oldest brother, said, by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I'd grown a lot. I was 6'6". And that's when my dad started to lose his stronghold in basketball. And he wrote, that's when dad started to cheat. He would change the score. He would foul us, trying to win these games. But, he's laughing about this as he's telling the story. But what we're getting to do as readers is see this relationship that he has with his dad and his brothers and how important this is to him. And that essay finished, I remember this. He said, this year is going to culminate in a very special experience for us because for the first time in our lives, my two brothers and I are going to be starters on our high school basketball team together. And I know there's going to come a time this season when our coach calls a timeout. And while we're in the huddle, I'm going to look up in the stands and we're going to see our dad sitting in the same seat where he sits for every game. And we're going to know that all those hours we spent on our home court playing, having fun, and beating each other up have all been worth it. So see how you learn about this kid? You learn about something that you would never know from the rest of the application. And that's like a combination of sharing something not mentioned elsewhere and sharing new information. This is about basketball. It's about basketball in his life, but it's a part of basketball the readers don't know about yet. So as you're writing your essays, unless they're asking you about something, they're like, here's an example. Sometimes they ask you about something on the application, in which case then you should talk about it. They might say, of the activities listed on your application, which has had the most meaning for you and why? Well, now you have to talk about something on the application. They're asking you to do that. But beyond that, we want to try to share new information with each essay that we're writing. So either talk about something that is not mentioned anywhere on the application or share new information that is mentioned elsewhere. Do it like the cross country runner who's sharing, like, here's something you didn't know about an activity or accomplishment that you did know about already. All right. So almost done here. Then I'm going to show you how to apply these to the supplemental essays. So don't try to impress admissions officers. Just be honest, own your stories, and don't repeat information from the rest of your application. All of these tips are around choosing what to write about. We haven't talked about the actual writing yet. And so here's the one piece of writing advice I have for you. And that is to sound like you. What do I mean by that? Well, part of writing a Mick essay, as that admissions officer described, is that you're sounding like everybody else. When you're trying to be impressive, students write things they would never say to another person. Like I've never heard a teenager say to a friend, I'll use that line from the Mick essay that he shared. Playing in the band has taught me many important lessons about hard work and perseverance. That might even be a true statement, but have you ever heard a teenager say that to a friend? It's not something that you would traditionally say to someone. And so this is where it's really important to remember that a college essay is not an academic essay. It's not like an essay that you write for your high school English class. This is an essay where they're trying to get to know you. And sounding like you means that it should sound like you. That litmus test I gave, if your family member or your best friend read your essay and said, oh, this is totally you, well, part of that is what you choose to write about. Part of it is what you say about it. How do you sound? Does this actually sound like the person that we know? Now, there are different ways to do this, but let me give you an example from a real college-wise student. I'll just let you read this. Now, this was something that she shared in an essay brainstorming meeting with a college-wise counselor. And she was talking about like this time that she did an emergency medical technician certification. And part of the certification is you do a ride along in an ambulance. And when she did the ride along in her ambulance, in the first 15 minutes of the shift, they got called to an accident where a car and a motorcycle had collided. And they took this motorcycle accident victim in the back of the ambulance to the hospital. And the paramedics told her to do chest compressions, which she did. And she was sharing it so matter of factly that the counselor said, that just sounds like a really stressful situation. Are you good in stressful situations? And the student said, I'm good in most stressful situations as long as they don't involve heights. And the counselor said, what do you mean? What's the story with you and heights? And she said, oh, I hate heights. I'm a complete scaredy cat when it comes to heights. See, there it is. There are the first two sentences. It should sound like you. It should be the way that you talk, the way you would communicate this story to another person. Now, here's the important thing to keep in mind. You are writing to a college admissions committee here. We all speak to different people in different ways. Adults do the same thing, right? So I talk to my best friend from college, who I've known for more than 30 years, differently than I might talk to my boss at work, right? That's natural. We all do that, right? That students, you're probably going to talk differently to a close friend than you would to your high school principal. So we have to find the right, I call that different voices. We use different voices with different people, right? And so we want to find the right voice to use for college essays. Here's a little trick to help you find the right voice. As you're writing your essays, keep asking yourself, would you say these words to someone else? If you were telling this story to someone, first of all, would you tell this story at all to another person? If you wouldn't tell it to another person at all, I might ask, why are you writing an essay about it? But if you were to tell it, would you say it using these words? Asking this question will keep you from being too formal. Because if you're writing it using words you don't usually use, phrases you don't normally use, injecting meaning into it, saying that you learned valuable lessons or how like this demonstrates your leadership abilities, but you would never actually say those words to another person when telling this story, then we know you're trying to be too formal and you need to relax a little bit and sound more like you. But the second question to ask yourself is, how would you describe this to your favorite teacher? Because your favorite teacher is presumably an adult, right? And one that you feel comfortable with, but one that you would probably feel comfortable with telling this story. If you don't have a favorite teacher, who's an adult who's not a family member that you might, and it could be, it could be a coach, it could be a boss at work, just someone that you respect and feel comfortable with, but like you would feel comfortable telling this story to. Asking yourself how you would describe it to them, that will keep you from being too informal, because you likely should not be writing a college essay telling that story exactly as you would tell it to your best friend, right? Your best friend, you're not writing a text message here, right? It is a college essay after all. It does need to be well written. It should be proofread. It is demonstrating to some degree your writing ability. So I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't take this seriously, that you shouldn't have an English teacher or a school counselor review it. You want it to be an example of your best writing, but you also want it to sound like you. And everybody has different voices with college essays. If you're Sometimes students will ask, is it okay to be funny in a college essay? And I say it's okay to be funny if you're funny, if that's who you are. Like, I think that student who wrote about being the slowest runner, she shared that example with us about having to ask for directions, and it made the counselor laugh. And the counselor said, put that in the essay, right? But I wouldn't write an essay where you're trying to be funny just to be funny, right? You want it to sound naturally like you. I'll give you like some examples. We had a student who wrote about like a class that he took outside of school in art that really like helped him appreciate art more, because he'd never been very creative. And the first sentence of his essay was, artistically, I peaked in kindergarten. And that's just something he said while we were talking about essays. We thought that was a great phrase. Another student who wrote an essay about playing in a band. He played the guitar in a band in high school, but he had a rough start to his music career. And as it started out, I wrote this down here. He wrote, I absolutely hated fifth grade. If I could pick a time in my life to call hell, it would definitely be fifth grade. And then he went on to describe that's when his parents were forcing him to take piano lessons, which he absolutely hated. And he was also at a new school where he didn't know anybody. And that was just the first paragraph. And the rest of the essay was about rediscovering music in high school, learning to play the guitar. But the way that started out, I absolutely hated fifth grade. If I could pick a time in my life to call hell, it would definitely be fifth grade. A lot of people are surprised that somebody might say that in a college essay, but that's how he tells this story. And you hear his voice, right? You also are getting details about him. So he's also taking ownership of the story. The Greek student I mentioned, as he described it, He called it Chaos in the Kitchen. He wrote, "My kitchen is lots of people, lots of yelling, kids doing hockey slap shots and ballet pirouettes and handstands while my grandmother is trying to cook a meal for 8 people." Right? That was his description. That's how he told this story. So when you put these 4 tips together and you use them as we're describing them here, it means that number one, when you're not trying to be impressive, you are avoiding the mistake that so many applicants make, including the highest achievers, the ones who have the highest GPAs and the best test scores and the best accomplishments applying to the most selective schools. They make this first mistake and they end up writing Mick essays. So when you just try to be honest, you are avoiding that mistake. When you own your stories and you put enough detail into them, or you recognize that you don't own a story because you can't find enough details, so you leave that to the side and choose a different story, you are then going to write essays that help you stand out, that show how your experience about whatever it is you're writing about is different from every other student's. It makes it more memorable so that when a admissions officer goes into committee to lobby for the people they want to admit, they're more likely to remember you and remember the stories that you shared. When you don't repeat information from the rest of your application, it means that you are using each piece and part of the application to share different parts of you. A college admissions officer is never going to know everything about you. You're too complex and interesting. They're going to know you based on limited means in these applications and essays. But the students who are savvy and use those parts to do different things are able to show more of their lives and more about who they are to admissions officers than those who repeat the same stories throughout the application. And finally, when you sound like you, well, then the admissions committee has a sense of your voice and who you are. It helps you stand out even more. It makes these essays more memorable. And the best parts about this is that these 4 tips are available to anyone. And they also will help you write even better college essays, no matter what the topic is. So, some examples. I want to go back to these supplemental essays that I talked about again to show you how, while these essays are very different, the tips still work the same. Okay, so look at this example again from Johns Hopkins. Well, what are most students going to do here? Most students are going to start by making that first mistake, right? What does this college admissions committee want to hear? What's going to sound impressive? Tell us about an important first in your life, big or small, that has helped you. Well, let me pick an activity or accomplishment that I'm really proud of, and I'll find some first in there, right? That the first time I ever served a meal at the homeless shelter as part of my National Charity League project, this is what I thought. This is what it was like for me. Now, if that's not necessarily bad, unless you're picking it because it's impressive. So now when we go back and we think, all right, let's use these tips. Well, first, I've got to think here about something that matters to me in high school. And using these examples, right? Maybe it's the slowest cross country runner, thinking about, well, when was the first time that I recognized I really liked being on the cross country team, right? Maybe for the kid who wrote about playing basketball at home, when was the first time that you beat your dad in that King for a Day competition? Why was that so meaningful and memorable to you? It has to be personal, right? But when we avoid that first mistake, we start to ask ourselves, what's my honest answer here? What would I really like to share? And then we use those other tips about owning your story, not repeating information, sounding like you, to tell that story in a way that's going to really grab the admissions reader. What the first is that you write about here is less important than what it shares with the admissions committee about you. So it could be the first shift at your part-time job. It could be the first time that you and your little sister that you take care of after school. I keep going back to these examples so we can build on them. It could be the first time that you actually went grocery shopping together, and how that became a regular thing that your little sister loved to do, and that it became something you did every Tuesday and Thursday together. It's part of your life. It's part of what you're sharing here, but you're not falling for that mistake of trying to pick what's impressive. Instead, you're just sharing about you and sharing details that will help you take ownership of it and sounding like you without repeating information from your application. What about this one from Boston College? It's asking about a meaningful tradition in your family or community. So the student who avoids that first mistake of trying to sound impressive is the one who says, okay, what's the tradition in my family? In my family, every Tuesday night is Taco Tuesday. right? And my dad, and we don't come from our culture isn't one from a country where tacos are plentiful. It's just something that my family likes to do. My dad always grills chicken or steak on the barbecue. But the reason that this is important to me is this is something we've been doing since I was 4 years old. And now I'm 17 years old applying to college, and we still every Tuesday night, whichever family members are here, and sometimes I'm off playing in a select baseball tournament or my sister is at a swim meet. But when we're here, we do Taco Tuesday every Tuesday. It matters to me. And I know when I come home from college for spring break and winter break and summer break, we're going to be doing Taco Tuesday and our family's going to sit around the dinner table and catch up just like we've been doing forever. Here, the example I just shared, that's a real one with some details. There's nothing deep about it. There's nothing where the student is saying, this proves that I can be successful at Boston College. They're not trying to be impressive. They're just answering the question. Boston College is asking this question because they want to get to know you better. That's what the point of all these essays are. Help us get to know this person. We don't have it. Even colleges that interview as part of the application process, it's almost never the admissions committee that does that. It's usually a graduate of the college, an alum that lives in the area and kind of volunteers to do this because they feel connected to the school. And admissions interviews like that, they matter a little bit, but they're the least important part of the application process. So the closest the admissions committee is going to get to hearing your voice, hearing what you want to talk about, it's going to be in these essays. Now, when you do the why this school or why this major or a combination of these two, these can be difficult for some students. The version of trying to sound impressive, here's what that looks like. They go to the school's website, they find a bunch of facts and figures about the school, and then they write this 300-word essay about the school. Well, the reason I want to study at Georgia Tech is because you have Nobel Prize winning professors, you have a student faculty ratio of, and they quote the ratio, you have this program, you have that program, and they're like writing an advertisement for the school. That's not going to, first of all, that's not an essay that you own because anybody else can write that. But the student that gets this right is the one who really thinks about, okay, I'm applying as a math major. I'm applying as a chemistry major. I'm applying as an engineering major. How did I make that decision? Why do I know that I want to study this? When I imagine doing this at Georgia Tech, why do I think this is a good place for me to do it? Studying engineering or math or science, whatever it might be, is going to be very different depending on where you go to college. The classes that are available to you, the required classes you have to take, is there research available there? Do students work on projects together? Is it focused on learning how to actually develop skills that you could use in a career, or is it more theoretical? There are different approaches to learning and teaching at various colleges. So what this is really doing here is showing, are you applying to Georgia Tech just because you've heard of Georgia Tech? Or are you applying here because you've really looked at this school and you know why you want to study this particular major at our particular school? See, that essay is still about you. It's not about Georgia Tech. It's about your motivations, how you discovered this, what it is about Georgia Tech that connects with you. Lots of students love to write in college essays. Well, you have a low student faculty ratio, meaning you have small classes where you encourage discussion. Colleges that have that know that about themselves. Why is that good for you? And a student that says, I've gone to a large public school where the average class size, is 40 students in most of my classes. And I would really like to spend some time in college getting to interact with my professors. That's why I'm applying to a school where I can have small classes. I'm not suggesting you should say that to Georgia Tech necessarily. I just mean that's an example where instead of talking about the college, you're talking about you. And then finally, at the University of Michigan, right? They're asking you to talk about how you are prepared to contribute to these goals that will challenge the present and enrich the future. That's a pretty big phrase, right? But if a student really thinks about it and says, well, what are they saying here? They want to develop leaders and citizens who will challenge the present and enrich the future. Have I done that in any small way in high school? If I'm the one who led the fundraiser to get parkas for the water polo team because we didn't have any and all the other teams had them, well, then, I've challenged the present and I've enriched the future. If I'm the one who lobbied for us to have an AP psychology course, if I'm the one who planned the summer workouts for the cross country team, if I'm the one who recognized that our community would really benefit from a neighborhood trash cleanup and I organized that, like any one of these could be a thing that you talk about that it might even be something you've mentioned on the application because they are asking you to share how you will do this at Michigan. And so describing how you've done it in high school and then saying, this is why I know I will be comfortable and excited to lean into opportunities to create this kind of change while I'm at Michigan, then you're showing those colleges exactly this college, exactly who you are and what you have to contribute. So, for my parting message here around college essays, before I let everybody get back to your summer, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. The college essay is a giant, and I'm saying the essay, it's more like the essays when you're applying to college. It is a wide open blank slate that's available to anyone, regardless of your GPA, regardless of your test scores, regardless of whether you've been the MVP or whether you've been the first chair violinist in the orchestra, regardless of whether you've got 100 hours of community service. Everyone has an equal chance to write great college essays. In order to make the most of this, I encourage all of you to start as early as possible. It doesn't mean you need to be writing all your essays now. In fact, many colleges don't even have their essay prompts available. But time is an enemy of great essay topics, meaning the longer you wait, the closer you get to the deadlines, the harder it is to relax and just tell these stories. And here, Kate, yes, I will. I'll share my contact info here in the I'll share it in the group chat to everyone. Okay, there's my email address if anyone has questions. I would encourage you, if you're writing essays and you'd like someone to review them for you, don't send those essays to me because I don't know you at all. It's hard for me to give advice with it for a student I don't know. But someone like your school counselor, someone like an English teacher is absolutely the right kind of person to review what you're writing. And even better, I'll give you an extra tip here. Run your topic idea, and I'll give you one. I'll give you one more point of contact here if anyone wants to know more about. Okay, I'll give you one last tip here to use. If you have someone who can help you, like a school counselor or an English teacher, approach them and run the topic by them before you write the essay. Before you write, you spend all this time, go to them and say, here's what I'm thinking about writing about. I'd love to just get your take on it. Because then they can give you that advice before you invest all the time and energy into it. If your school counselor is able to say to you before you write the essay, that really sounds like you might be onto something there, but that's also something that I know a lot of other students are going to be writing about. Is there any way that we could make that essay a little more unique to you? Now you're having that collaborative discussion versus writing the essay and then bringing it to them. And now your school counselor's in a position or your English teacher's in a position where they have to say, I'm not sure this essay is going to get the job done. And then you have to unwind all of that work. So I really appreciate everyone being here for this. I hope that you found these tips useful. Please use the time that you have available. The fact that so many of you are here today is a great sign because we're not even in August yet. It means you are thinking about this. The Common Application essay prompts are not changing this year. They are the exact same as last year. So you can look them up online and actually begin working on your Common Application essay as soon as you're ready to start. And then the supplemental essays